Section 26 of the Persons with Disabilities Act ataupun Section 26 Akta OKU 2008 membuat satu keperluan untuk semua fasiliti awam menjadi fasiliti yang boleh diakses oleh orang kurang upaya.
There are, I would say, some, positive things, but my argument is that it is still very much in the physical realm, and if it is taking into consideration sensory experiences and keperluan yang bukan sahaja physical, it is more for respite.
We need also support of the councils to upgrade kan, because a lot of the older buildings, so there's a constant need untuk ubah suaikan yang lama.
It's not just for charity. What I hate to say that dia bukan charity tau. Jangan rasa macam kita buat sebab kita kesian, kan? No, it's not about that. It's for economic purposes as well. If you do it, you attract more of us to go to your place.
Hello, selamat datang ke Kita Family Podcast. Hari ini kita akan membincangkan perihal berkenaan dengan makna serta kepentingan hidup bermasyarakat, menghargai keunikan serta kepelbagaian sesama kita dan meraihkan masyarakat yang berbilang agama, kaum, kepercayaan, rupa dan juga keupayaan. Kita di Kita Family menghargai hidup secara inklusif yang mengambil kira keperluan segenap lapisan masyarakat, terutama mereka yang kurang atau berkelainan upaya. Pada hari ini bersama saya di studio adalah Nori. Hai Nori.
Hai, Assalamualaikum.
Dan juga SK.
Apa khabar?
Dan dari Kota Kinabalu Bersabah, coming in, Didi.
Hai, Assalamualaikum.
Pada hari ini kami akan membincangkan satu topik yang memang sangat penting bagi penyesuaian, iaitu penyesuaian di fasiliti awam. That means accommodation in public facilities. Public facilities are there for the public, and that has to be inclusive of anybody with disabilities, whether they are neurodivergent or with physical disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as far as the law is concerned, and I'll just start with the law before I open it up for discussion, Section 26 of the Persons with Disabilities Act ataupun Section 26 Akta OKU 2008 membuat satu keperluan untuk semua fasiliti awam menjadi fasiliti yang boleh diakses oleh orang kurang upaya. Dan ada berbagai jenis akses yang kami akan bincangkan, dan kita akan bincang apa yang memang ada pada hari ini, dan dalam segmen kedua kami akan membincangkan apakah our wish list, apakah pandangan jauh, what do we want. So untuk memulakan apakah itu akses, saya akan menceritakan sikit berkenaan universal design.
Yes.
Universal design adalah design yang diperuntukkan di bawah Street Drainage and Building Act yang menyatakan bahawa kesemua fasiliti, sama ada pejabat pos, perumahan, mana-mana fasiliti di mana-mana sahaja, bangunan dan even public transportation perlu mempunyai akses kepada semua lapisan masyarakat dan semua keupayaan. Itu adalah prinsip universal design. Tetapi, adakah kami mencapai apa yang dikatakan on paper sebagai universal design? Dan perkara ini telah ada di Malaysia lebih 20 tahun. So for 20 years, we've had universal design features, and I was tutored on it by Dr. Naziati, Associate Professor in University Malaya School of Architecture, because she was a real passionate advocate about universal design and still is. But let's hear from the others as to what facilities we have, and then we'll go to Didi, who will tell us about her experiences. Okay, so we'll start with Nori.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I think currently in Malaysia, as you mentioned, kalau dari segi undang-undang, kita memang ada peruntukan untuk memastikan bahawa fasiliti atau tempat-tempat awam kita akan menjadi yalah, sekurang-kurangnya dari segi perundangan tu dan dari segi ideal, it must be inclusive, right?
Yes.
Maknanya akses untuk kita dapat menggunakan, memasuki all these different types of spaces adalah untuk memastikan segenap lapisan masyarakat boleh menggunakan tempat-tempat inilah, sama ada we're talking about taman permainan ke, we're talking about bangunan-bangunan tertentu, of course termasuk juga public transport, right? All these things are important. So
Auditorium.
Yes. So but I would say that I feel that in Malaysia buat masa ni lah kan, fokus masih kepada accessibility kepada OKU physical. Sebagai contoh, banyak diperkatakan tentang memastikan accessibility untuk kerusi roda. So wheelchair accessibility is one of the sort of obvious ones and things where, I mean, alhamdulillah, it's a good thing that it has something that has seen improvement over the years, because kadang-kadang kita kata, okay, kita memerlukan ramp. Right? So we have a proper ramp. The wheelchair is supposed to be able to use it. Tapi kalau tak ikut juga regulation, the ramp is too steep. The wheelchair still cannot go up the ramp, right? So when we speak about some of these things, satu, kita kena tengok kepada perincian dari segi khususnya, adakah setiap pengubahsuaian ataupun application of the law and the consideration, adakah dia memang menepati tujuan dan matlamat. That's one of the things, because for example kadang-kadang there is a toilet atau tandas yang memang sepatutnya diperuntukkan tandas OKU, right? It says it is wheelchair accessible, but it is put at like a particular corner, and somehow around that corner is like tong sampah or something like that. Something ends up blocking the door. So there are these things that happen. Satu, the focus is on that, but then even that is not done as well as possible, right? And the other thing, when we talk about taking into consideration OKU dari segi neurodivergence, sama ada mereka yang memang mempunyai permasalahan fizikal atau tidak, there is other things to think about. And so far, we think about where they can have maybe like a safe space. So sebagai contoh, memang kita dah ada shopping centre yang jadi mesra autism, for example. Ada tempat-tempat yang sekarang mempunyai sensory atau calming room, which is really, it's like a good step. But that is like almost like we know that there's a possibility you're going to be overwhelmed in this space because of ramai orang or whatever it is, and this is like okay, here is a space for you to go to if it's too much. But I don't know at this point in time kalau kita boleh mengatakan bahawa perkara-perkara yang diperlukan ini untuk menjadi lebih inklusif sudah difikirkan dari segala aspek
yang lain
pembangunan, right?
Yes.
Like what about the lighting? What about the noise? Things like that. Is there anything that can be controlled better ataupun something that is a little bit more, friendly in general in so many ways? I'm not sure if we are there yet. But, to speak about the good things, for example, kalau kita tengok macam pengangkutan awam, public transport, there are considerations, based on your OKU card, right? We have accessibility for not just, for example, the MRT or the LRT, but onto the buses that serve them. There's also different places yang kita boleh anggap seperti mengalu-alukan lah kehadiran mereka yang OKU based on the card. Like if you want to go to zoo, for example, having an OKU card, like, is good for things like that. There are many places that offer free entrances or discounts and
theme parks.
So There are, I would say, some positive things, but my argument is that it is still very much in the physical realm. And if it is taking into consideration sensory experiences and keperluan yang bukan sahaja physical, it is more for respite. That's kind of my view. I mean, I'd love to hear what the rest of you have to say. I don't know, SK,
No,
you want to jump in?
So for me, I think even the
sorry.
tactile flooring when it
Mm.
comes to the blind,
Yes.
and we see that a lot in brick fields in KL. And I mean,
That's because the NGO is a
is the-
persatuan kan, Malaysian
Betul.
Association for the Blind is in Brickfields, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And in most other places, that same tactile flooring is used as a 5-foot way. Ada meja, ada kerusi. So bagaimana orang yang kurang penglihatan akan navigate their public spaces? And I think this is something that happens around Oasis Place as well.
Indeed,
Kan, SK?
indeed.
Yeah, you're around the corner
Yeah.
from them.
Yes,
kan?
indeed, and we
Yes.
experience it all the time. So dalam cara physical, so the physicality of the provision,
Mhm.
actually before that is the detailing,
Yeah.
detailing, and actually the maintenance.
Yeah.
You see?
So that's why not all traffic lights will have the bunyi, right? To
Betul.
indicate it's green for the,
For
for those who are
those
blind,
blind,
right? Yeah.
yes.
Some traffic lights, we don't get the sound yang
Yes.
we don't have that to say. Yeah.
So in the planning,
Maintenance.
so if we go backwards about the physical access
Mhm.
of the RAM, or sometimes the implementation belum lagi well supervised or maintained. So sometimes you have a RAM, it's inconsistent. So the
Exactly.
inconsistency ni needs attention.
Yeah.
We need, what I find, as you mentioned in Brickfields where Oasis is the voice of the public needs to help the maintenance team to report.
Yes.
We have the responsibility, and we do that often around Brickfields, because memang ramai orang yang kurang penglihatan, they are on the street all the time.
Yeah.
And what we notice actually, the people are very kind, because it is a community of non-profit groups and the blind association.
Yes.
They are very visibly on the road. What gets disrupted is when there are repair works. Kan?
Okay.
So
Yes.
as Anit mentioned, kalau sudah rosak, we perhaps can introduce more cameras. Yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
sure. These are for the future, or just regular inspection. Of course, all these are cost of maintenance. But in
It's a
the
culture also.
it is a culture.
Kan budaya lah. Kalau
Memang.
kita lebih prihatin dan mengambil berat tentang perkara-perkara ini, then maybe it
Yeah.
would be better. Right?
So there we again. I invite all of us to participate. Do report. Actually, masa kami report dekat DBKL, and in fact now there's an online
Yes.
way to report it. Trust me, they do take action. So let us join in to support accessibility, to support the regular upkeep, maintenance, to keep it going. But going back a little bit, we need also support of the councils to upgrade, kan? Because a lot of the older buildings, so there's a constant need untuk ubah suaikan yang lama.
Yeah.
You gave the
Betul,
contoh
betul.
of just the lights, the traffic lights, but even building.
Yes.
Yeah, the building needs to be upgraded with some detailing. Yeah, so that is for the physical disability. But in the mobility aspect, as we know, some of the mobility transport is provided, but detailed in public transport of buses, for example. Kami tahu
it's
when
not universal.
it's not
Yeah,
universal, or even it does need quite a major revamp. If we travel to some of the more developed countries, there are already spaces to park the wheelchair, or their equipment
Yes.
by the driver. And we see that maybe in our airport buses.
Yes.
So it is available. And what we need to do is to petition to expand that to all public transport. Yeah, that would be a very simple, practical start for public transport.
Improvement, yeah.
Yeah.
Public
So
transport.
these are
improvement,
just public facilities, but it also would extend to places of worship.
Indeed.
It would extend to places of recreation,
Mhm.
cultural places.
In
fact,
are they not considered public places at the moment?
They are,
Dia kat tempat awam kan?
but
Tetapi
terlalu banyak fokus kepada pengangkutan awam, fasiliti awam, tetapi kurang fokus kepada places of worship yang bukan under local council ataupun national council.
Right.
That
So it's private.
It's a
It's
private
space, kan?
spaces.
Yeah.
Yes.
Private space.
private
Betul.
tapi access
Access
kepada
public.
orang ramai. So
Yeah.
public so it's accessible to the masses and a lot of different people. Tetapi sebab secara teknikal bukan
Dikelolakan oleh local council
yes,
ataupun
oleh kerajaan sama ada
Actually-
pihak berkuasa tempatan or whatever. So kalau tidak di bawah that kind of purview, then it's like dia
difficult
terlepas
to-
lah.
Yeah, terlepas and difficult to enforce.
Yeah. Actually, sebagai contoh, just the parking. It's good that you brought up parking too. If the physical disability peoples may be using the tricycle, yeah. So their park spot is not a bicycle spot, kan?
Exactly.
Right. So provisions like that need to be intentional. Tapi, if I can just say then the hidden disability, we encourage them to take transport by themselves, by biking, for example.
Exactly.
Right. However, the bikes may not have covered bike parks.
Exactly.
So masa hujan, there is no
Well, we are
provision.
not a very cyclist-friendly city to begin. We don't have many, we're not really. I mean, any of our big cities are not really
Yeah.
cyclist-friendly.
But those are
pun
the
kan.
type of planning that needs to be put in, because we know that for our neurodivergent individuals, going into public transport may be a bit overwhelming, but they have ability to ride the bike, and that makes a big difference for them to go to school, go to work. It can contribute to that access to employment too. So in the planning, although yes, we may not be obviously as bike friendly, but I think from current, I think it's more a sports, using bicycle for sports. I believe bicycling is a very important part of transportation for practical and functional purposes.
It is because KL has car free day, car free morning. I know Ipoh has that too,
Yes,
and some
yes,
of the
on
big
Sunday.
cities have that. But in urban areas, and it's not across the nation. So ini tidak
And those are
serata.
tak sambung,
special mornings. That's not
Correct.
like, so what does that mean for all the regular days?
Exactly.
That dia memang tak menggalakkan lah. So,
So memang menjadi isu kerana actually design requirements require accommodation for those with hearing impairments, visual impairments, mobility impairments, cognitive and learning impairments,
banyak
and
actually. kalau
and
kita nak
hidden
fikirkan.
as
Hidden
well.
disabilities, yeah.
hidden disabilities as well of people with diversities in age and stature, including frail people.
Of course.
Yes.
So,
betul.
we are looking at a broader spectrum. It's not just the neurodivergent, but you have the elderly, which are becoming more and more. It's a bigger number in Malaysia right now, and
Betul.
we don't expect them to stay at home. They want to go
Betul.
out too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to go across to Didi because Didi's going to give us a perspective and a lived perspective and a perspective out of KL.
Okay, well mungkin kalau parents neurodivergent macam kita ni, kalau yang bukan advocate dengar macam perlu ke all this accommodation, why is it important, because anak-anak kita bukannya ada masalah fizikal kan, tapi as you live with your children, you nak bawa anak you keluar, you nak bawa anak you pergi shopping mall, pergi tengok wayang, pergi all these public spaces, right? You will find that tempat-tempat tertentu adalah lebih mudah untuk kita. Dan kita tak fikirkan sangat, kenapa dia mudah, kenapa pergi sini seronok, pergi sini alamak mudah tantrum ke, ataupun macam akan ada masalah-masalah lah dari segi macam nak bawa barang, kita tak cukup tangan nak pegang anak lagi, nak bawa barang kan. So kita tak fikir. Bila I look back kan, my experience dah my eldest dah 15, so kita cakap kalau 15 tahun lah kan, anak yelah seusia dia lah kan, dia memang dilahirkan autistik, dan dengan adik umur 13, so sepanjang 13 tahun ni kita dapat rasa tempat tertentu susah, tempat yang bagaimana rasa mudah, dan kemudian only like recently, I think about 5 years kan, baru kita ada mall yang kita dah di brand as Mesra Autism. Ada yang tempat yang lebih OKU friendly, yang memang secara obviously lah mereka menyatakan yang mereka mempunyai inisiatif untuk menjadi lebih OKU friendly. Dan kita dapat rasa lah benda-benda ni memang menjadikan experience kita lebih mudah, dan kita memang nak pergi, kita tahu kalau pergi tengok wayang yang macam ni dengan lampu ni tidak terlalu gelap, bunyi speaker dia tidak terlalu kuat, anak-anak kita akan jadi lebih seronok lah. Jadi sebelum ni kan, sebelum ada jenama-jenama yang okay, this is autism friendly, this is this, macam contoh di airport kita ada butterfly effect kan, banyak try and error, dan banyak kita punya experience lah, lama-lama kita macam ada kita punya preferred tempat nak pergi. Tak semestinya dia kena ada label kan, macam this is autism
betul.
friendly. Tak, kita sendiri akan ada prefer. And then soalan-soalan yang selalu ada dalam support group online, ada orang akan tanya, saya nak bawa anak saya pergi bercuti, dekat mana yang sesuai? Jadi parents akan mulalah share tempat mana yang mereka ada pengalaman yang baik, pengalaman yang bagus, contoh theme park yang mana, hotel yang mana yang sesuai, destinasi mana yang mereka dapat pengalaman yang menyeronokkan lah, pengalaman yang baik. Jadi di sini menunjukkan sebenarnya it's not just for charity. What I hate to say that dia bukan charity tau. Jangan rasa macam kita buat sebab kita kesian kan. No, it's not about that. It's for economic purposes as well. If you do it, you attract more of us to go to your place.
Exactly.
No, betul. I mean, we have like in our family, sebagai contoh kan, kita ada antara shopping center yang kita lebih suka because surau dia better. You know, like it's like just like things like that. It's like when you are making, I think we're not just talking about accessibility. What about thinking about making it more welcoming?
Yeah.
So kalau kita guna perkataan welcoming tu, then it can go back to like what you said lah, from economic standpoint, especially if it's a place of business. Right? Why wouldn't you want more people to come? Yeah. Sorry, did you continue?
Wider aisles. Wider aisles, for example. Right? Yeah.
Exactly. Sebab I ingat kan masa kita nak train anak-anak kita pergi shopping kan, lepas balik sekolah, okay, come mama take you kedai yang macam mana yang kita pilih lah. Mula-mula pilih 7-Eleven yang lapang. Sebab kan kalau yang macam cakap kan, kalau nanti kan langgar sikit jatuh, ada yang susun barang tinggi-tinggi tu, alamak. So kita pilih kedai macam grocer yang tak besar sangat, yang mudah parking. Selalunya macam saya akan memilih pergi bukan di hujung minggu, dan tempat yang tidak sesak supaya dapat parking dekat. Itu yang bila ada shopping mall yang Mesra Autism yang ada parking slot for autism family yang dekat dengan entrance, that is very useful. So it's not just, macam cakap lah, it's not just about helping, it's about attracting and giving you more business. So benda-benda macam ni. And then even in KK kan, macam sekarang kami of course kita still dalam fasa exploring kan, pergi sini, pergi sana, pergi tempat-tempat yang tourist destination pun ada, shopping mall pun ada, kedai pun ada. So we are still trying to see yang mana yang selesa untuk anak-anak. And of course ada tempat yang mereka sendiri akan request. They have their preference and they will say that, Mama nak pergi lagi. Tempat yang seronok kan. So itu yang I think kita sebagai parents, kalau kita dah faham dan kita dapat maklumat, kita boleh buat informed choices lah, which is lebih peratus untuk kita punya outing tu selesa dan memberi kedangan yang manis tu lebih tinggi lah daripada kita tempat-tempat yang mendapat review yang tak baik, ataupun kita dah baca experience orang lain yang mungkin cakap tempat ni mungkin bunyi tak sesuai. Dan juga contoh satu lagi dari segi sensory kan, kalau untuk anak-anak autistik, ada satu mall ni dia mempunyai escalator yang tinggi, dan bagi saya agak menggayatkan lah. Escalator dia tinggi, jadi anak-anak pun tak apa suka sebab rasa lama atas escalator, dan kiri kanan tu tak ada, sebab dia tengah-tengah tau, so kosong, so you macam terapung, so dia menggayatkan. Dan kemudian dia punya elevator pula, lift dia bubble lift, so dia glass kan, jadi kalau you gayat escalator, dalam lift tu pun you boleh gayat juga sebab you can see outside. Jadi dia tak ada macam, kalau ada setengah tempat tu mungkin escalator dia tinggi tapi elevator dia tertutup, jadi boleh pilih lah, okey lah kita naik lift lah daripada kita naik escalator. Jadi benda-benda macam tu lah options, experience kan anak-anak kita. Dan kemudian dari segi ada car broom ke tak, sebab kita pun tak boleh nak elak suasana bising di kawasan public ni, tak boleh lah suruh semua orang senyap, dia bukan library kan. Tapi dengan adanya calming room, kita tahulah bila anak kita nampak overwhelmed, dan kita perlukan exit plan lah, di mana kita nak diffuse kan, nak bagi dia lega dulu, nak bagi dia tenang, ada ruang. So sangat membantulah sebenarnya. Jadi saya kat sini nak menggalakkan business entity, dan not just under yang untuk commercial area. I think public spaces under the under Dewan Bandaraya, Majlis Perbandaran dan everything pun patutlah menyediakan ruang-ruang dan all this kemudahan yang membantu anak-anak autistik, dan of course OKU of all categories. Sebab dia kita tahu ini semua provision is supposed to be hak kita semua kan, untuk enjoy all these spaces. We should get all the equal rights. Itu yang inklusif lah, mencapai satu inklusif.
Betul.
If I can just tambahkan dalam suasana shopping mall. Sebenarnya and we've been consulted several times, and this is what we will say to the shopping mall. Whilst kami look at the physical accommodation, sebenarnya the first responders in the mall, example, the guards,
Yes.
the kakaks in the bathrooms and toilets,
Maintenance and cleaning
maintenance
staff.
and cleaning staff.
Yeah.
Perhaps maybe very likely the first responder when parents have a challenging situation during what they call a tantrum or a meltdown. And oftentimes it's in the car park.
Yes.
Yeah, and Didi and several of us, I think, have had stories. And usually it's the guards or security, the car park security attendants who are there. And they may not know what to do.
Correct.
Yeah. Similarly, I think as parents, oftentimes they will try to lead anaknya to the tandas to calm down,
Correct.
either to get water or just to get away from the crowd.
Yeah.
And again, the
Sebab tak ada
attendants
tempat
are there.
lain.
Yeah, tak ada tempat lain. So many a times we say, even before you do any physical accommodation,
Do the training.
Do the training. Or
Training
sekurang-kurangnya
lagi.
do the awareness.
Yes.
Because they are kind. They are just like another human being, but they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
So from that, they can lead, and this is the other adaptation or accommodation very important in public spaces or in malls, petanda to, if they have safe spaces, or sometimes to an office somewhere. Yeah, because
Like a signage.
Signage,
Just signage.
yeah, signage. But
Yeah.
coming back again to these first responders, they will know the building well.
Yeah.
Yeah, where they can find quieter places perhaps, or kalau best designated safe spaces. Kan? Yeah.
So they
just
guide
as
you
a-
straight away to say, kakak boleh pergi ke sana,
Yes,
and that itself will calm a parent down.
indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we hope a shout out to the malls.
Yes. And
This-
their managements.
and just like Nori say, and many families choose to go regularly when they are served
Yes.
first.
And their needs are
Met.
Met. Yeah. Thank
Yes,
you for
Didi?
that reminder.
You wanted to say something with from SK's
Oh,
thing about training.
yeah. Training, of course, because physical accommodation tu perlukan masa, perlukan budget yang lebih, perlukan renovation tu perlukan tutup certain area apa semua. It will take lots of planning, but of course training kita bagi kesedaran, awareness, dan hopefully acceptance and understanding tu datang dan membentuk empati lah dari kalangan staff kan. And calming space pun janganlah mall sebesar-besar mall tu satu je. Kalau boleh biar ada lebih dari satu supaya kalau like anak tu meltdown dekat the other end of the mall, nak pergi ke kan calming space tu jauh. So hopefully ada this pocket of area yang boleh membantulah.
That's right. The pocket of areas sebenarnya doesn't take much cost.
No,
But
exactly.
it takes creativity to,
Yes.
when you are aware, all you need is a little tent, for example, on the same floor. Didi, as you mentioned, is very important, especially kalau mall tu like panjang lebar, right? From one
Yeah.
end of the corridor to the other.
Preferably not near the toilet because we all head to the toilet anyway. So somewhere in between.
Yes. So all this are planning. Yeah?
Yeah.
All this are planning.
No, and especially kalau kita boleh sebut lah untuk pemaju-pemaju yang baru kan. Like when you are thinking about designing from scratch. Obviously this is when kita ada peluang untuk menjimatkan kos,
Yes.
untuk memikirkan benda-benda ni semua. Dari segi perspektif yang like membolehkan kita start fresh lah. Right?
Betul.
Kita tak perlu nak renovate. Sebab kita baru nak mula membina. So that is the time when you have the opportunity to take these things into consideration. I think that is something that is also
So the call
quite
from Nori is to developers and designers and architects to say,
Yeah.
please have a meeting, at least one meeting, to say, in this design, have we incorporated universal design? Adakah apa-apa facility yang kita boleh tambah baik untuk memberi kesempatan kepada orang-orang yang kurang upaya untuk lebih menikmati apa facility yang kita akan bina
Yeah,
ini.
so the brief should be, for example, kalau kita kadang-kadang, these days, we always talk about what is like the aesthetic consideration. Mana tempat yang insta-worthy, kan? Mana tempat kononnya ada sudut-sudut tertentu di mana-mana lokasi lah yang orang nak pergi sebab kat situlah dia nak ambil gambar and things like that. So this is like, this has like a, some kind of like an aesthetic or trendy or whatever consideration. I mean, I think we should just add on to the fact and say, well, the brief is make it aesthetic and make it accessible. Why not? Right? I mean,
I think
why not? You just have to say that's what it
Yeah.
is. This is the need. This is the requirement today, kan? Bukan saja dari segi aspek tertentu yang dulu kita fikirkan. Sekarang ni kita perlu memikirkan tentang bab inklusif. So
I think the call
can be
then,
done.
the invitation then is to Pertubuhan Arkitek Malaysia, and they have, to their credit,
Yes.
look into universal design, and our invitation
Malaysian
is-
Institute of Planners, we were
as
so
well as
happy.
Malaysia Institute of
Yes.
Planners. Thank you for the reminder.
That was
And surveyors.
great.
And
Yes.
surveyors.
Yes.
So the continuous conversation for inclusivity, for accommodation, is moving into that universal design.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. On that note, we're going to take a short break. Kita akan jumpa lagi dalam segmen seterusnya. Selamat kembali. Hari ini kami sedang membincangkan berkenaan penyesuaian di fasiliti awam, public facilities. Pada segmen pertama, kami telah membincangkan apa yang sedia ada, apa yang apa undang-undang, apa yang sedia ada, apakah perancangan yang perlu dinyatakan. Tetapi dalam segmen kedua, kami hendak dengar daripada fellow podcasters, apakah their vision, their wish list, apakah yang mereka ingin ada di Malaysia supaya ia menjadi lebih inklusif kepada semua yang kurang upaya dan terutamanya kepada yang neurodivergent. So saya akan mula dengan Didi. So what does your dream and your wish list look like?
Okay, ada dua. Satu, benda yang dah available perlu accessible. Sebab selalu kadang-kadang tandas OKU tu ada tapi dikunci. Kemudian ada parking OKU tapi ada kon. You just imagine this driver sorang-sorang perlu pakai wheelchair kan bila keluar daripada kereta tapi
Ada
ada kon
kon.
dekat. Ha. Those things dah ada kan. Kemudian ada ramp yang terutama di supermarket lah. Ada ramp tapi ada dia letak what do you call that thing penghadang sebab tak nak orang bawa keluar stroller. This one yang fix punya tau. Dia fix. Dia dah bolt kan sebab tak nak orang bawa keluar troli. So macam okay, then dia dah jadi tak boleh guna. Dia available tapi dah tak boleh guna dah. Jadi kita nak pastikan benda yang kita dah memang dirancang untuk boleh diguna, biarlah boleh digunakan. Dan saya faham benda-benda ni kadang-kadang dibuat, dihalang sebab misuse, penyalahgunaan oleh mereka yang tidak sepatutnya menggunakan. Contoh, mereka yang suka guna parking OKU, dia tak ada keperluan tapi guna parking OKU, jadi itu yang security letakkan kon. Tapi bila letak kon, kalau security tak ada, siapa nak alihkan kon? Benda-benda macam tu kan, nak elakkan orang bawa troli keluar daripada kawasan tu, jadi wheelchair pun tak boleh nak masuk. So, perkara-perkara macam ni perlu titik beratkan dan kita perlu meningkatkan lagilah kesedaran di kalangan masyarakat supaya tidak menyebabkan pihak pengurusan mengambil keputusan yang sebenarnya backwards lah. You dah bina facilities, lepas tu you tak nak bagi guna sebab tak nak orang misuse kan. Jadi yang tu kita mengharapkan kesedaran masyarakat untuk fahamlah kenapa perlunya ada spaces, ruang-ruang dan kemudahan tertentu ni khas untuk OKU. Macam contoh parking OKU tu kenapa lebih besar? Oh bukan untuk you menyelit, nampak ruang tu ada boleh letak motor, boleh tak. No, mereka memerlukan ruang yang luas, petak yang lebih luas daripada biasa sebab nanti nak keluarkan wheelchair kan.
It's
Jadi
budaya and mindset lah in this case kan.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. So dari segi mindset ni, yang ni kita bukan nak, sebenarnya kita nak buat training, kita nak buat awareness program pun memerlukan budget of course, tapi at least it's not a big project kan. Kita tak perlu macam perlu ada satu nak kena rebuild benda-benda ni. Jadi yalah, mengharapkan masyarakat, ahli keluarga kita ingatkan anak-anak kita, ingatkan kawan-kawan kita bila kita keluar sama-sama kawan kan, kalau nampak ada kawan yang nak gunakan parking OKU ke ataupun misuse facilities yang sebenarnya disediakan khas untuk OKU, kita ni lah. Dan termasuk juga mengutamakan mereka yang dengan strollers, dengan wheelchair bila menggunakan lift. Sebab kita kalau kita able bodied kan, kita boleh gunakan escalator. Jadi benda-benda macam timbang rasa dan bagi prioriti keutamaan kepada mereka yang lebih memerlukan. So that's satu harapan. Dan harapan kedua ialah of course saya nak lihat anak-anak saya berdikari, mampu, independen dan boleh navigate, boleh pergi ke sesuatu tempat tu dengan sendiri. Jadi bila kita nak anak kita pergi sendiri, of course kita harapkan tempat tu tidak menyebabkan mereka overwhelmed kan, menyebabkan mereka ada potensi untuk meltdown ke, untuk macam sensory overload. Yang tu sebab tu kita nakkan public spaces lebih sensory friendly dan mempunyai universal design di mana signage untuk macam tandasnya, untuk nak pergi direction, semua mudah difahami, tidak menimbulkan confusion. Sebab if I remember, I think the past 10 years kan ramai yang suka nak jadi kreatif. Dia nak tunjuk tandas tu lelaki dengan tandas perempuan, they use like symbol yang macam kita pun kena fikir, oh yang ni gambar perempuan pakai topi, oh ni tandas perempuan.
Ya. Oh my god, they do that. Macam jadi high-tech sikit. High-tech sampai
so macam
tidak
kita kena,
difahami.
just imagine kalau Amy dalam keadaan tak tahan nak pergi toilet ni, tiba-tiba nak kena fikir dulu, yang mana tandas lelaki, mana tandas perempuan kan. So uh, memang mengharapkan mengekalkan user design memang tak mungkin rasa macam kurang kreatif, kurang berseni, but it's actually very important.
Aspek
Kemudian
keselamatan above all, right? Actually,
Safety for those using it. Yes, correct.
And then dari segi arahan-arahan yang bertulis tu kan ada instruction dalam bahasa yang mudah, dalam bentuk yang mudah untuk difahami. Mungkin macam contoh saya suka kalau anak saya kan bila pergi taman ke apa nanti tulis jangan pijak rumput. Oh mereka akan macam jangan pijak. Ikut sangat tau.
Yeah.
So those sign are actually very helpful dan harapnya ada standard yang dia tak adalah macam tak ada tulis pun tak boleh pijak, and then bila lalu kena marah kan, tiba-tiba je macam mana saya tahu tak boleh lalu situ. So those thing biar ada standard, biar ada satu yang mudah diikuti, difahami dan meningkatkan peluang lah untuk mereka berdikari dan boleh navigate kan, nak pergi sana pergi sini dengan sendiri sebab nampak clear kan ni. Sebab memang ada masa mereka boleh memikirkan, boleh tengok ni, kita boleh macam boleh fikir ni sebenarnya maksud dia ni maksud dia, tapi bila mereka dalam keadaan tertekan ke ataupun kan sebab dia punya fluctuation of their capacity kan, tiba-tiba macam tak boleh nak fikir, itu yang memerlukan satu standard. Sebab so much of kita rasa benda ni sangat perlu untuk mereka yang neurodivergent, but let's be honest, it's actually very useful for us pun. Sebab ada hari kita pun macam terlampau penat ke apa, kita pun dah tak boleh nak fikir sangat.
Actually, can I jump in on this one?
Yes.
We frequently talk about the preparation and planning kan. Kalau kita nak membawa seorang yang neurodivergent atau OKU keluar bersama-sama kita menghadapi situasi baru. Practically, most buildings, organizations, places or whatever has a website these days, right? So in that website, why is there not, for example, like a social story about what it's like to come to a space?
Okay.
I was very, very touched that for the first time, can you imagine? I didn't have to write a social story when I went to a dentist. The dentist gave me the social story. After that, I was like, best dentist ever. It's like, like why is there not like a version of for example, today I think it's easy. The easy reference point for us is, so far we've been talking about shopping malls, right? Website of the shopping mall, dia kan ada map. Dia kan macam-macam information lah. Ini directory untuk makanan, ini directory untuk fashion, whatever. Why is there not one section that is, supposed to be more for those who are, need accessibility, right? Anybody who needs extra accommodation, if you're coming to the mall for the first time, these are the things. So that's one that I wanted to jump in. Like that will help that sense of like if you could prep, right? If Amy and Afia wanted to go to a new shopping mall, right, for the first time, wouldn't it be great if you could also say, here, look, I didn't have to do the whole thing. The mall has a social story for you. Right? Where is the best entrance for you to be dropped off?
Yes.
Hey.
Where can you go and sit? For example, there's maybe like a transition space from one, wing to another, or from outside in, like certain things like that could be really great, And then the second thing that, I was reminded about, and I know Anit was also going to ask me, but if I can just mention it now, dalam keadaan di mana kita sangat-sangat memerlukan, so going back to zaman COVID, and then we had to do vaccination, we had all this, PPV, things like that, because ia melibatkan semua orang, segenap lapisan masyarakat, peringkat umur yang sangat luas, like everybody had, this happen, then we had guidelines. that were very inclusive.
Yes.
And we had places were set up to make sure that the disabled was provided for. The hidden disabilities also were provided for. And also, the joke, I think in an earlier episode, kita pernah mention, tiba-tiba the whole world needed social stories kan? Kita semua memerlukan bagaimana untuk mengambil vaksin. How to prepare, what to bring, what to expect. Kan? First step macam ni, lepas ni macam ni. Suddenly everything came out in this beautiful visual format.
Yeah.
Everything mudah difahami. So that was like, memang kita dah pernah
tahu.
semua everybody knew everything lah at that time.
Trained.
Everybody who had to do it. So it's like if we can go back to remembering that many other things are like that.
Yeah.
Sebenarnya diperlukan oleh semua orang. Apa salahnya kalau kita ambilkan apa yang kita pernah buat pada masa tu. Usaha pada masa tu. Pendirian kita, the way we looked at things and all that. I mean, like for example now, the whole online webinar culture is still, I mean, we wouldn't have Didi be able to come from Kota Kinabalu if we don't take advantage of this technology. Because sekarang ni, even though kita dah tak ada PKP, kita memang tetap menggunakan ni untuk memberi kita kemudahan untuk bekerja atau berjumpa. Sungguh pun, kita berjauhan dari segi fizikal. These are some of the things that we have kept, right? So I really wish, actually my wish, Anik, is like, we keep some of these things that we had done before. Itu because rasa macam sangat perlu, macam terdesak. But why don't we just accept that it's sangat perlu today? Why don't kita terus membudayakan untuk menjadi lebih inklusif untuk semua. Dan antara perkara-perkara yang kita belajar, kita buat masa tu, why not teruskan? Kan? Why not teruskan?
So secara praktikalnya, actually Nori, brilliant suggestion, and please, like Didi cakap, there is a commercial sense in this.
Yes.
So apa yang kami mencakapkan about visual schedule is signages.
Yes.
And signages, when is clear and put into sequence tu, menjadi, in our language we say social story, tapi sebenarnya it is infographics kan?
Yes. Absolutely. Visual support.
So we invite lah, this point that if we can consistently remember
to apply
actually
all
it's the
these
intention.
things.
Kan?
Actually,
It's the
yes,
intention.
betul. Niat. Kalau
Niat,
kita pasang niat,
Yeah.
then God willing, insyaAllah, whatever, for all the good things in the world, these are things that can happen if we have that intention.
And
So,
the
betul.
infographics can have a voice.
Indeed.
Yep.
With technology.
For those who cannot
Surely,
and,
yes.
And that will make it more accessible.
Yep. There's so many ways to make these things, accessible. It's just whether we want to do it or not lah.
So now that is alerted, that is a practical thing.
Yeah.
Whether mall ke, even in a standalone shop ke, or even in any learning spaces.
And then we talked about
education
places of worship.
Yes.
Kan?
Indeed.
Actually that one lah, if kita fikirkan, tempat-tempat beribadat ni, inilah antara tempat yang patutnya paling inklusif really.
Yes.
Lagi memerlukan kan. So
Especially
So kami menjemput lah.
Timur, kan?
Kami menjemput
Yeah.
semuanya. Just use that signage that as one of the most basic, least cost, very low cost, just creative and intentional kan.
Yes, and exactly. And,
And
just
every
general the kesedaran. Macam ni, why not incorporate in your khutbah Jumaat about being a bit more inclusive? Oops. But I mean, just get the message out there lah.
Yeah. So
And as you said, kalau kita perlu ubah suai, sebab ada bangunan yang memang sedia ada, yang memang akan diubah suai, bukannya dibina daripada baru.
Asan.
Okay?
Yeah.
So semasa pengubahsuaian itu, ambil kira apakah ciri-ciri yang boleh kami masukkan untuk menjadikan
Bukan just satu keperluan. Maybe multiple keperluan. Alah-alah dah nak kena renovate kan? Boleh elok-elok.
And buat masa proses perancangan.
Yes.
Dan bukan masa tengah buat tu, tak, stop. That will ambil cost because that's a variation. Tapi kalau you buat di masa awal, dapatkan consultant, atau adakan satu meeting sahaja untuk untuk
Universal design.
Universal design. That will make a difference.
Yes.
Yes.
So
as
on
we-
my part, then the wish that looks like this.
Okay.
I am thinking that the consistency, sama ada kami di bandar ke, balik kampung ke, and that picture that you drew earlier, even within brickfields, the continuity lah, from town to town, state to state, nationwide. And here again, I think a shout out to the Malaysian Institute of Planners to continue to build, and there is actually a focus for the Planning Institute and the architectural profession to look into universal design nationwide. It is
Yes.
already in motion.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
maknanya apa yang kita ada, perluaskanlah.
Perluaskan.
Jangan ada tempat-tempat yang ditinggalkan.
Correct.
Yang kita tak
And-
buat benda-benda ni.
And there you go, we can
Yeah.
semua cuti Malaysia.
Betul.
And we have
That's
beautiful country.
true.
And then on the
Yeah.
other part, I have been attending more aging, or what they call now care economy. And we have to remember, sebenarnya all of us, also the neurodivergent individuals and family, also age. Yeah. So again, this power of universal design will apply to many areas of diversity. And as we grow older, our needs does change for adaptation, both physically and cognitively. And it is actually a part of life now for us as every individual, as Malaysian or any individual. So that's the wish list.
No, it's true. Like
Through Hayat, yes, Sepanjang Hayat.
it's like one space can have considerations untuk beberapa keperluan, right?
Mhm.
So like that toilet picture I shared from like Japan, kan? The
Yes.
toilet picture from Japan. Sign di dalam tandas yang sangat luas. Tandas ini is like they called it the accessible toilet. So it wasn't specifically to OKU because inside the sign had all these like, explaining why this toilet was so nice and luas. There's a bench in case you need a bench. There was hooks for somebody maybe having like a colostomy bag, needing
Medical
hook
device
that.
change, yeah.
A mom with a stroller can come in comfortably with a stroller.
Yeah.
They even had one section that said, I am a disabled person and I might need a carer to come in with me. And this carer might be somebody of the opposite sex, sebagai contoh. So it was like, so inside the toilet, there was like multiple, like the toilet bowl, the urinal, it was, luas and just like, it took into consideration multiple types of keperluan, right? So we're not saying that this toilet is for the elderly. This is the wheelchair access toilet. That it could be a toilet that really is for, those
Everybody.
multiple purposes.
Sounds very efficient, kan?
That you need, yes. At least that, right? So you could
Sometimes
have
even a pregnant
things.
mother needs more space.
Yes.
Just the
Yes.
space, exactly.
Yes.
So that the cubicles pun tak kecil sangat.
So-
There's
so this-
space between them as well.
Yeah.
Multiple considerations in one space.
So I think this shift of mindset ni, sebenarnya dalam planning, we do already see baby changing spaces and so forth. Kan? Maybe the planning here is gabungkan, is intentionality,
Yes.
is
Yeah.
understanding, is upskilling and providing not so much extra, but a revision. Kan?
Yeah,
a
that's a nice way
revision
of
of the
looking at
space.
it. Yeah. Think about the multi-usage of
Yes.
something lah, kan?
It's
So-
about, it's about normalizing things outside what is the traditional mindset. So kalau
betul.
dulu
Yes.
kita kurang membawa bayi berjalan-jalan, mereka lebih berada di rumah, di kawasan taman, itu sahaja. Tapi sekarang di public spaces memang ada keperluan dan a demand for changing rooms and breastfeeding rooms.
Yes,
Right?
exactly.
So similarly, if you are normalizing taking children out and breastfeeding, we can do that for disabilities too.
Yes. Yeah.
Totally
being able to
agree.
bring out neurodivergent kids. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I
So
think let's like cover our bases.
Yes,
Maybe
so
if I
to
can
end,
read
Nori.
certain things. So kita nak fikirkan bukan sahaja dari segi keperluan fizikal, but for example, if we talk about hidden disabilities and things, especially sensory issue is like a big one.
Yes.
Kan? How can we, for example, manage noise a little bit better? These things can be done with like surfaces. Right? Like, is it the kind of like apa-apa bahan, whatever yang bahan pembinaan yang digunakan, is it akan melantunkan bunyi? Are we going to get a lot of echo? Or is it something that can be muted? And again, kita boleh gabungkan keperluan. So it could be like, maybe it's needed by somebody that has the auditory, concerns, but it could be aesthetically pleasing for somebody else, right? Acoustic environment tu kita buat sana, tapi untuk orang lain, like sejuk mata memandang, for example,
Or Instagrammable even.
Yeah. So, and then the other thing is could be like, reducing visual noise. Right? So like sometimes there's places where it's not just the lighting. It's like the use of color. It's like glossy surfaces versus matte surfaces. Matte surfaces are easier to, kind of take in. And then also we know that, sebagai manusia, kita memang sebenarnya kalau kita tengok sejarah dan evolusi kita macam mana pun, kita memang adalah insan yang biasa di dalam keadaan, like kira, suasana persekitaran that is like, actually, in fact, we are in nature, close to nature.
Yes.
That is why sometimes when we need to relax, kita memang nak tengok pemandangan hijau, why do we still like to look at things like that? Because it is, so
Natural.
much more soothing, easier to process. So there is considerations like that also for built environments and spaces, right? So there's that consideration. How do you adjust the visual noise? And then things like easy entrances. Is it easy entrance from public transportation? And then is the entrance like sort of wide enough? And then we were talking about transition spaces, right? So why not have like, as you enter, if you talk about hotels and things like that, there's like a lobby, there's a place for people to sit down. And I think it could be helpful if there's a place sometimes to sit down, because you're transitioning from going to one environment to another environment. So, different things like that. And then when we talk about now, there are calming rooms, sensory rooms and things like that available. Satu, of course, kita nak perluaskan. Why not as many buildings as possible have that, right? Rather than just one or two places yang kita kata, oh, this place is wonderful sebab ada. Why not we just make that something that's just like as common as having like surau, for example. And in that space, yang tu pun boleh terus maybe diperbaiki juga. Like for example, not just being able to control lighting, but what about like different types of chairs, different type of sitting options, or so many things.
You mentioned that,
We
the
can
moving
bring-
chairs.
Yes, yeah.
I've seen that in some malls.
Yes.
Yeah. So many things we can actually do, and we are hoping that people will just take bits of this and
Put
just
in their
remember that this is this can benefit you as well. I love that Didi brought that up. So I'm gonna like repeat again what everybody said. Right, there should be like an economic motivation, commercial
Yes.
motivation. The attractiveness of something is a good thing. It's a good thing for everybody. So look at it that way, right?
Yes.
Satu manfaat kepada semua. Bukan saja yang atas dasar yang dia lah yang amat memerlukan. Kalau kita fikirkan secara baik, benda ni akan menjadi sesuatu yang bagus untuk semua.
Yeah.
Right? Not
Indeed.
just satu
Betul.
golongan like that. Be a bit more creative lah.
So like
Yeah.
with neurodivergence, as Kay pointed out, it's not just children who are neurodivergent who grow up with having these challenges. Those who are aging develop some form of neurodiversity too.
And disability, we've talked about that,
and
right?
Disability.
Panjang
and-
umur nanti you face it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So some will have to use a wheelchair, but some of them may also have cognitive decline,
Yes.
but they still want to go out. They
Yep.
still want to enjoy a meal. So if
Mhm.
there is an economic benefit that an entire family can go and enjoy something with their aged family member,
Yeah, why not?
why
then?
not?
Yeah,
And
betul.
that will definitely bring more people in. Obviously not a theme park, but But you never know.
But theme
they may
parks
be
are smart
public.
now, right?
Yeah.
Theme parks are smart now. There's the section for all the thrill seekers.
And
And then there's a section, of course, for younger children and all that, because they know. It's like kita tahu sekarang ni. And by the way, we know this, right? When you attract children, this is a good thing because children never go anywhere with the adults, and children adalah antara yang paling power dari segi memujuk parents or something. They will be the one to say, I need to buy this, I need to eat this, So maybe kalau just orang dewasa or whatever your teenager is going, they will just hang out in the mall. They're there for the aircon, and all that. Because let's face it lah, ni lah tempat yang memang kita banyak meluangkan masa di Malaysia kerana keadaan cuaca kita, right? Tapi orang
country
yang
is
akan
hot.
membeli dan menggunakan perkhidmatan adalah parents kepada anak, right? Sorry, Dee, you can say something?
Your country is so hot.
My country so hot, ya.
Our country.
Yalah, you negeri di bawah bayu, sorry lah, your country less hot.
So to end, there's a long wish list, but it's not impossible. We want all public places to be inclusive to all
Yes.
disabilities, and we just need to start.
Yeah.
So it's a call for action by all of us here at Kita Family, for all the professionals involved, for anybody thinking about a public space to please have universal design as well as inclusivity in their list. With that, thank you very much. Please join us on Instagram, follow us on Facebook, TikTok, we are there too. Also listen to us on Spotify as well as YouTube. Like, share and subscribe. And we love to hear from you. Please leave comments. We'd like to hear more. Then we will address some of these things in our coming episodes. Okay, with that, jumpa lagi.
Jumpa lagi.